Even getting pregnant was not by choice. I wasn't allowed to leave the house, so I wasn't allowed to get on birth control, and I wasn't allowed to say no to intercourse. So it was just bound to happen. And it was terrifying for me. He always had this anger and this control. And when I told him I was going in labor, he didn't believe me. He didn't really care. It was just like, whatever, he brushed it off. I just sat there in my room and I just gave up. And I just remember crying and just crying and crying. And his mom walking in and saying, ew, blood, and then shutting the door behind herself.
What?
I thought that I was just going to die there. As many times as him and my father have tried to kill me physically, like to death, I thought my life was going to end through complications of birth because I never got any prenatal care or anything. And I was like, well, this is it. So I just sat there and I cried and she came out. He called the midwife and she came, cleaned me up, gave me some antibiotics, and that was that. And I woke up the next day and back to chores.
What? You gave birth to your daughter alone on the bed, just
on the floor.
on. Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you'd like to see our faces, you can go to our YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness. I love seeing the new subscriptions coming in. We are so close to 200,000, and it really means a lot that you guys are willing to support and advocate for these people who are coming on and bravely sharing their stories with us, because there are consequences, and truly it means a lot when you can leave those comments, those words of encouragement for them as well. So today's guest, I was introduced to her by our previous guest, Yasmin, and I'm very excited to talk to her. She was born in Iraq, and then she came over to the US when she was a baby. And when she was 14, she was forced to go back to Iraq and get married at 14. And we're going to talk about what it's like living in a high control situation at home. We're talking about extreme patriarchy here, about the culture and of being raised in the Middle East or being in the Middle East and what that was like, how that affected her. And so thank you so much for joining us, Ellaf.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. We really appreciate you being here and sharing with us. I listened to your interview with Yasmin and I was like, I need to talk to her. You have an incredible story. It's so inspirational. And I just really appreciate you coming on and being willing to share.
Thank you. I'm excited to share. I feel like, so many of us, specifically women, go through so much and some never make it out. So spreading awareness, I think, is very important. So thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I feel like your story goes way back to even your parents to really understand the context of what you ended up going through. So can you share a little bit about your parents, how they ended up coming to the US and the events that followed?
Yes, of course. To start from the beginning, I was a month old and there was war going on in 1991 between Saddam, Iraq, and Kuwait. It was really bad. So the United Nations had planes and I was a month old and they were just getting us on and got us to refugee camps in Saudi Arabia. We spent about 2 years there before we came to America. So I was, I kind of say it's like born and raised in America because that's all I've ever known. I was raised in Dearborn, Michigan, which is one of the highest population of Middle Eastern Muslim people in America, over 1 million people. And, it was just, I was raised like any other person, went to school, things like that. My mom stayed at home and my dad worked. I was the oldest of, we were 3 girls and I was the oldest. And then we had a younger brother. My mom got pregnant and because it was a girl, my dad was really angry about that. In our culture, there's a thing where it's just so much easier to raise a boy than it is to raise a girl. There's so much more risk. The girl is always, going to carry the name of the husband. So having a boy is so much more important. So when my dad heard that he was having a 4th daughter, he wasn't very happy about it. At the same time, it was around 2004 when we were here in America, we were at war with Iraq and the whole thing was Saddam Hussein. And around that time is when they caught him and all of that was happening. So for the first time ever, we were able to visit back home in Iraq. And that's what my dad did. He took me and my siblings, my younger siblings, all to Iraq, and he remarried, kind of like somebody random, and left my mom in America. So we were all in Iraq when that happened.
Wow. What happened to your mom?
From what I remember, because I was 14 years old at the time, we owned our home, like we had a mortgage, and, when you don't pay your mortgage for a couple of months is before you get evicted. So I think at the time my mom was living in it alone and pregnant by herself.
Oh my
And
gosh.
my dad was in Iraq just starting a whole new life.
Wow. I can't
Yeah.
even imagine what she must have been going through. And also taking her children. Did you have any contact with your mom when you went back to Iraq?
Mm-mm.
Really? So, wow. I can't even imagine what she was feeling having her children taken away, and she's pregnant and she's alone. And was she working before you left? Did she have a job?
She's never worked. I mean, she's been in America over 30 years and barely speaks English because the community we lived in is dominantly Arabic, Middle Eastern. So she never needed to learn English, but she also, we were raised, very traditional. The man works, the woman stays at home. So she didn't know how to get by in America. She didn't know how to do anything. So, I mean, even though I was going through stuff, I like you said, I can't imagine what my mother was going through, pregnant and all alone. And she has no family in America. All her family's back home in Iraq. So it was a hard time for all of us.
Yeah. Did she ever go back to Iraq, or did you reconnect with her? I just have so many questions. Like, how did she manage, I guess?
A lot of things were happening in those few years, but what I remember is she had my baby sister, and we were in Iraq, and she came back to be with us and be with my father. And when she did, that's when he treated her even worse and took her passport away from her and wouldn't sign for my sister's passport. And it was just a lot of like control and physical and mental abuse being done to her. So she did come back to Iraq, yes, but then she was kind of trapped there for almost a year or so, I believe, before she was able to come back because of the complications of getting passport and everything for my sister to be able to go back.
All right, so you're 14 years old. That's the age where usually, especially if you were in the States, you were starting to like boys and maybe wanting relationships. Were you allowed to date at all before you went back to Iraq?
Oh, not at all. The way we were raised is, I remember one time I was in 5th grade and it was like PTA meetings, and a boy said hi to me like in front of my father. And when I went home, I was in trouble for that. And that was in the 5th grade.
What?
Yes. They believe that no dating, nothing. I was actually not even really allowed to have friends. I never walked to school. I never participated in events or things like that, birthday parties. It was just very, very, we were very controlled. We never grew up with cable or internet or anything like that. So we were very kind of sheltered. And I think their goal of that was to just, I don't know, control and not let us live corrupted or westernized in a way.
So you weren't even allowed to have friends who also had the same beliefs and culture as you?
I was when it was like at school, but to go out with friends and you know how girls do now, go out with friends, go to the movies or the mall. No, I was not. Even later in life, when I was an adult, I was not allowed.
Okay, so you're already isolated before you're taken out of the country. Did you have any sort of recognition, because you said it was a community of people who are similar to you? I assume maybe some of them had the same type of rules or lifestyle. Did you realize that you were isolated, or was it something that was just part of your reality?
I knew I had a strict father, very controlling, strict father, but a lot of other girls did as well. So it wasn't something that I was trying to fight against. Again, I was only in middle school. Maybe, we'd go to the park and find a way to hang out with our friends or something. But it wasn't something we really fought against because the culture of the community we were in was, the majority was like that as well.
Okay. And did you have a good relationship with your mom?
One thing that I learned growing up and being a parent now is I didn't have a much of a relationship with my mother or my father. I don't remember times sitting down and talking at the dinner table or saying I love you or getting hugs or showing affection. I don't have any memories of that.
Oh, okay. Is that a cultural thing as well, or just something that your family did?
No, I think it is just something my family did because I know other cousins and other friends, they were very affectionate and were close to their parents. But us, it was more like a fear. Just don't do anything
Mm,
wrong and you won't get in trouble, but you don't know what's wrong. So you just stay quiet or stay
yeah.
distant.
Okay. I was asking about the relationship with your mother because I wondered what your dad said to you to get you to leave with him, if you knew that you were leaving mom behind or how you felt about that.
Honestly, growing up, we never questioned anything our father said. It wasn't in our mentality to question it. And I feel like when we were children, before the internet was popular and people had phones and everybody had phones, we never questioned things because we didn't have access to information. So it was just what he said went like, and that was it. But he told us the first time he took us to Iraq that we were going to Dubai for vacation, and that's what we did. He took us to Dubai for a week or two. We were really young, and then from there we got on a boat and he went to Iraq. So we didn't know that was happening. Like he tricked us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I assume that when that happened, you were probably upset when you realized you weren't actually going to go back home. How did you feel about that?
I didn't realize it till later, much later, when I had several men come and propose and ask for my hand, and my dad tried to kind of push it, and I could hear him and my uncles talking and saying, "Yeah, yeah, just get her married off, so you don't have to deal with it." So I didn't realize what was going on. I didn't know much about marriage. I didn't know much about anything. And, when I tell you that I wasn't close with my family, even growing up and going through puberty, everything I learned about my body, I learned through school.
Mm.
My mom never taught me anything about menstrual cycle or anything like that. So I just was so oblivious, I feel like at the time. I was like, in a way, just innocent, just younger than I even was.
Yeah. Okay. So you're 14 years old. You're in Iraq now. You're hearing these proposals happening behind the scenes, and you're 14. So I, man, I'm trying to think about myself at 14 years old. That would have been a train wreck if someone was trying to get me married that young. I mean, you said you didn't know much about marriage. What's the concept that you have of marriage as far as when you're hearing this going, oh, I think I'm going to get married soon? What did you think that meant, really?
There's a certain point where you can't really think about options because you have none. I was taken
Mm,
to Iraq. I barely spoke the language at the time because growing up in America, we just went to school. My mom was in the kitchen, my dad was at work, so me and my siblings just talked to each other, and they were, still in barely elementary and middle school. So I barely spoke the language. I barely knew the food. I barely knew the culture. I couldn't comprehend things. I didn't think about comprehending things. I didn't think about planning because now I'm in this country where I can't even get by. When I knew that that was his plan and that was his goal, I just had to accept reality in a way and just navigate survival.
absolutely. I was just going to say you were in survival mode.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. So, with that, when your dad tells you, I found someone to marry you, did you know this person? What were they like? How old were they?
So I knew that several people were coming to propose, and this person was a distant family friend and sort of a cousin in a way, distant. And he was about 25 at the time, and I was 14. And we've spoken before or been in the same room, but I didn't know him like closely. So for me, in my eyes, I thought, wow, well, this person's at least closer to my age. At least he seems nice. So I knew I had to agree to somebody. So I thought to agree to the best option was my only choice.
Is that common to get married so young? I'm completely unfamiliar with what it's like culturally in the Middle East. And so I just want to get an understanding if it's normal to get married at such a young age.
It is not looked down upon. It is normal for girls in the Middle East to get married once they're developed, when it comes to, puberty, because they're able to carry a child and start a family. Most of that usually happens in the country area where girls don't really go to school and that's not an option. But the majority of the cities in Iraq and the Middle East, most girls do not get married that young. Most
Okay.
girls go to college and get jobs and have careers. But in my specific situation, it was my father kind of controlling. It's like he saw me as an object, as a liability, and just needed to get it out of the way so he could live his life. And then once I was passed on to my husband, then his control and his ways, I was under his authority in a way.
Okay. What about your other younger sisters?
After I got married, my engagement was about 10 days long, and it was just something really quick. Like, it wasn't most girls that even do get married or even young, they have that engagement opportunity to get to know their fiance,
Okay.
to get to pick out the bedroom or their room or their, everything that comes with getting married. For me, it was like, just take her, just like
Oh,
take whatever you have. Like, I don't even care. Like, I'm not going to fight for rights for my daughter, whatever it is, like whatever you want in the house, just like take it and get it like off my back type situation. And I didn't realize that until later, but because my dad never stood up for my rights as a woman, my husband didn't give me any rights in any kind of way. So my dad really set the foundation for me very, very poorly.
yeah.
After he got rid of me and I got married, after a few weeks, he did a visa for his wife and brought her and my siblings back to America. So then I was totally alone in Iraq
Oh.
with nobody.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm a little unfamiliar with you talked about your dad setting the rights. What does that mean exactly? Could you explain that?
I know there's different, Islam is portrayed in different ways, and you probably have heard when women get married, people will say that their dad is given a bunch of money, the dowry. That money that is given to the woman, when she is married, that is in return for her virginity. Because the virginity of a woman and her saving herself for her husband is so valuable that they give you a bunch of money to buy gold, to buy new clothes, to buy new outfits, because you're going from being a child to a woman and you're giving your virginity to your husband. And that's so valuable in Islam. And it's your right. It's your right to have that money. And it never goes to the father. It goes to the woman. People have a conception that it goes to the father and the father takes the money and that he sold his daughter. No, it goes to the daughter, and it's her security to buy gold and be more beautiful and buy things to be more beautiful. And if you talk to any Middle Eastern woman or a Muslim woman here in America now, they'll say my dowry is like nothing less than 50 grand, 100 grand, and a house and a car, like, because this is what I deserve. I've saved my body for you and I'm giving my life to you, because a woman is valuable. But the culture and the religion are two different things. And my dad was not a religious man. He was more like, he was very just selfish, and the culture of him being worried that I would get a boyfriend or that I would do something wrong or give my body to somebody. He wanted to eliminate that at all costs and just give me away. So he never fought for my right for things like that.
Okay. Wow. So d- you said you didn't notice a lot of this until later. So you weren't really clocking the situation that you were being put in until it got worse, right?
Correct. I didn't know how things like this operated or worked or the culture at all. I was very, very oblivious.
Okay, so let's talk about what life was like when you did get married. How were things at home? How was your husband? How did he treat you?
I had to adapt a lot. I had to adapt the way I sat, the way I ate, when I ate, how I slept, things like that. And not because I was married, but because of the culture shift. Even though my nationality is Iraqi and I was raised Muslim, I I didn't learn any of this stuff because I was just a schoolgirl in America. In the beginning, it was fine, but it was very much like, no, you can't sit here, you can't do that, you can't do that. Like everything was controlled. What I ate, like I said, what I ate, when I ate, I wasn't allowed to leave the house at all without his permission or his presence. The person that I was married to was 10 times more controlling than my father. So even going to the market with his mother, things like that, that was not an option.
Oh my gosh. So you said even the way you slept. How would you have to change the way that you slept?
Oh, you don't go to sleep until your husband comes home and you satisfy him, make sure he's okay, make sure he has everything you need, or that he needs. So you don't get to just sleep whenever you want type thing. You got to make sure all the housework was done. You have to make sure that everybody else is fed first, things like that.
Oh, wow. How did you adjust to this? You're 14 years old and now everything, every facet of your life is controlled in a culture that you weren't really familiar with.
It was really hard. I took a lot of hard hits physically before I learned to cooperate in a way, because my dad never stood up for me, never cared about my well-being. My husband knew that, and he knew that. And it's like, he knew what he could get away with, and he was going to get away with as much as he could. So whenever I would say, it's like, oh, I don't want to have intercourse like tonight, I'm tired. And he's like, oh, okay. So he'll just drag me by my hair in the room with his hand on my mouth. And he'd be like, okay, how about now? Like, are you ready now?
Oh my gosh.
And then I quickly learned that in order to physically and mentally say safe, I just needed to follow.
Yeah, just comply. Wow, that's terrifying. Okay, so I know from your interview with Yasmin, you ended up getting pregnant fairly quickly at 15 years old. What's going through your mind at that point?
To be honest with you, I don't remember. There's a lot of memories I do block, but I don't remember much of my pregnancy. I know I didn't get any prenatal care with any of my pregnancies with all three. Whatever I was going through at the time, I don't remember. I never had communication with my parents unless it was through his phone. Maybe once a month or so they would call and it would be on speaker and he would have to listen to everything. So, and at the time my siblings were still in middle school, so they didn't have phones to call me. They were also controlled by my father. So the only calls that I would get would be like him and my mother here and there, but I don't remember. Like, I don't remember talking to anybody. I don't remember, journaling. I don't remember what I was going through because it just feels like a lifetime away.
Oh my gosh, that must have been terrifying. At 15 years old, pregnant, so isolated. So I remember from your interview as well, you ended up going to the States to have the baby. What was that like?
It was a breath of fresh air. My dad came and took me back to America to deliver my son when I was about 7 months pregnant. I feel like he did it out of guilt because, I was his first daughter. He was becoming a grandfather, and I was 15, about to have a baby. At the time in Iraq, healthcare wasn't great at all, and I don't even know if it still is. So I came back to America and had my son, and it was nice. It was nice to be around family, but I just had him and got his passport and went back.
So like within days, weeks, months?
A few months.
Okay. Oh, at that point, were you trying to fight to stay in the US, or you knew that you had to go back?
Oh, I knew I didn't have a choice. I was 16, maybe. At the time, still, I look back and I realize that I was just conditioned to follow, whether it be him, my father, or my husband. There was no standing up for yourself. Like, they had to approve of you. The concept of, let me fight for my right, let me run and try to find resources, let me find somewhere safe to live, that never resonated, because I didn't know there was such a thing at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're probably still just in survival mode, so it's hard to even think of any other option. Are you comfortable talking about your birthing stories?
Yes, of course.
Okay, because I'm curious, if you had your baby in the US and you were only 16, I feel like there may have been some red flags in the hospital system. Were you able to give birth in a hospital?
Yes, I gave birth in a hospital. My mother was with me for a few minutes of it, and then she left. And then I remember one of my aunts was there holding my hand, and then after that, I was kind of alone there too. I don't remember being questioned about anything. With my second son, and when I came back to America after a few years, I also had him all alone. I just woke up my dad. He took me to the hospital, and my mom stayed at home with my older son, and I just delivered him alone as well, but at the hospital.
Oh my gosh. Ugh, having just given birth, that's incredible. I can't believe that you had to do that on your own. And I'm sure it was traumatic in ways, and maybe you don't want to revisit that. Were the nurses helpful? I mean, do you have any sort of memory as to how you got through that?
Yes, I remember my back was hurting so much during one of my pregnancies or in delivery that I had a nurse just rub my back the whole time, and I was just craving ice during labor at one of the times, and I just remember a nurse just feeding me ice. And looking back, they were amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I had back labor with mine and it was excruciating. I did it natural for 28 hours before I had to transfer to a hospital. So it's just, oh, were you able to get an epidural? Was that allowed for you?
Yes, the first for my first son, I got an epidural because your first baby, you're in labor longer. With my second one, I learned more, and I was walking and doing more things at home before I went to the hospital, and I had him within 20 minutes, which
Oh,
was great.
wow. Okay, that's
Yeah,
good. Yeah, that's
of
a
getting
positive.
there. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about, if you're comfortable, the things that you went through with your second child and how that had you staying in the US for longer.
Yes. So I believe I was about 17 or 18 when I had my second son. And same as the previous one, I came to America to have him. And during my pregnancy, I remember I just wanted to learn. Like, I've never really even been to high school because of the situation. So I really wanted to learn. I went to the library, got books, and I would just study to get my GED. And I was just studying all my pregnancy while I was in America because I couldn't leave the house. And, I was just staying at home and pregnant. So I studied really hard for my GED. I had my son, and when on the day that I woke up to go take my GED, I was putting his clothes on. He was about 8, 9 months old, and he had a seizure. I rushed him to the hospital. He had another one and another one, and he was in and out of the hospital for 2 to 3 years. I was supposed to go back to Iraq right after delivering him, just like the first one, but because I had to stay here and get medical care for him, his father was not happy about that, not being able to have that control and for me to be his housewife there and take care of him. So it made him very, very angry.
Wow. So he never came to the US during that time.
No, he couldn't. He didn't have a visa
Oh, got it.
because I was so young. When are we going to do a marital visa for a girl, that's a teenager? It wouldn't happen either.
Yeah. What was life like for you when you were in the US? Did you have any more freedoms or were you under your dad's roof the same amount of control?
I was under my dad's roof, under even more control than before, because now I'm an adult. And, if I do go out and date or do something, I'm able to because, I'm not a virgin anymore. And, saying it really bluntly. So there's even more control. I was not allowed to have friends. I did go to school to become a medical assistant during that time, so I took advantage of that time that I had. But I remember, my father would always pick me up and he'd be at school early. He'd make sure I didn't talk to no boys. I still didn't have a phone. At that time, I was 18, 19. I still was not allowed to have a phone. I remember one time I was just so stressed out and depressed, and I said, Dad, like, I just want to hang out with some girls, like some girlfriends, please,
Yeah.
can I? And he wouldn't. So I had to call the cops to come escort me out of the house just so I can go hang out with my friends.
Oh, wow.
And it really made my dad angry.
Yeah. Being isolated also as a mother of two children, one whom is having health concerns, I can't imagine how alone you must have felt and stir crazy. And you can't even have a phone as a mom?
Well,
how are you dealing with that with your kids and going to school? Was your mother watching the kids, or how did you manage?
No, by this time we moved to New Mexico and my mother stayed in Michigan and my parents were totally divorced. So I didn't even have my mom anymore after that. School was my escape. Work was my escape. It was the only freedom I had. Outside of that, I was just back home and not able to do anything. But that was the only freedom I had.
So you were able to work. What job were you doing at the time?
So after I finished school, I did a short program about 8, 9 months to become a medical assistant. I instantly got offered a job on my internship and I started working. But even with that, all my money went to my father. I didn't have no power over it. I wasn't allowed to live on my own or anything like that.
Did you have your own bank account, or it just all went to his account?
I believe I had my own bank account, but he had control over it.
Okay, so then when did you have to go back to Iraq?
So actually, while I was staying there in America, we started a visa for my husband and to bring him here. We thought, okay, our son is sick. Let's get started on the visa. And we worked on it and I spent a lot of money and time and effort on it. And when he actually got his visa and he was supposed to come, my father again tricked me and said, hey, well, before he comes, let's just go get him and let the kids visit their grandparents back in Iraq from their dad's side. And we'll all come back. I said, okay, that works. Like, they can see their grandparents. That, like, I don't mind. Like, I just wanted that approval. And I left all the money that I've made, everything. I had stuff saved up, because in my mind, I was bringing my husband back to America. As soon as I get to Iraq, my dad takes all our passports, all the money, my debit card, everything. And he's like, yeah, bye. And he just left me there.
Oh my gosh, he took them back to the States, your passports?
I don't know what he did with them, but he took them from me and all my money.
Wow. Okay, so you're back home. What's it like now that you're back home with these two young kids and your husband again?
That's when things really got bad. Even though I believe, my husband at the time had some a resentment and anger towards me and my father for maybe putting him through all this and not getting him to America. And for me being so distant from him, even when the first day we went back, he refused to even touch his son or look at him because he had this resentment because he was blaming him for all this.
Oh.
So he had all this bottled up and he took it all out on me. And that's when, my father was like, even more not standing up for my rights and what I deserved as a woman, as his child. That's when my husband at the time even took advantage more of that fact. So that's when things really got bad. And the physical, sexual, and mental abuse escalated levels.
Oh my gosh. So were you still isolated at home? Were you allowed to go out and meet anyone even within your same culture that he would approve of?
Oh, no. No, not even the neighbor's house.
Really?
No, I was not allowed to leave at all. We lived with his parents and his siblings, and I was always watched. I never had any privacy. We shared a room with the kids as well. I wasn't even allowed to leave for birth control. Unless I was with him, I was not allowed to leave at all.
Okay. I'm just flabbergasted. Honestly, I don't know how you made it through. I would have gone absolutely insane. How are your kids doing at home? How did your husband treat them?
He treated them pretty horribly as well. His control wasn't just for me, or it wasn't just he had something against me. It was towards anybody he can control. He couldn't do anything to his siblings or his parents or anybody else in his life, but to us he could. And he did. He'd always make sure the kids were shaved bald, and he never bought them clothes. He never bought them food. He never took care of them like a father. They were always scared of him. They'd play and have fun, but once they hear him come home, they run to their grandfather for safety.
Oh, man.
Because, they lived in fear.
Wow. Why would he shave their heads?
Colorism was really big. So I have a deep tan. Their father also has a deep tan, curly hair, but you're looked down upon in our culture. In a way, you're ugly just for having tanner skin and curlier hair, because the
Really?
beauty standard is light skin, straight hair. So people always tell me, they're like, oh, you're so pretty. Only if you were just a little paler. Or I remember I'll look back at my pictures back then and my face would be super white from makeup and nothing else from my body would match. And it was because I needed to fit those standards. So because my kids had curly hair as well, they were always shaved bald. My daughter, I had to, even when she was a toddler, straighten her hair all the time to make her look better and more accepted.
Oh no, curly
Mm-hmm.
hair is so beautiful.
Try convincing him that.
Oh. So if you lived with his family and they saw this going on, they didn't try to step in or stop it?
They did several times. They did, to points where they would kick him out of the house, to points where even his father, as an old man, would hit him and kick him out. But to an extent, is like, where do we go? This is his home. He's their son. So of course, he's priority over us, but where do we go when all this goes down? Because there's nowhere for me and the kids to go. So it was like, they would fight for our rights, but it's like, just deal with it type of thing, because we had kids.
Yeah. Did you have a good relationship with them? Did you feel like you could confide in them about anything?
Growing up in our culture, mental health was not something talked about. It's non-existent. It was just, you have enough to eat, you're in the home, what else do you want type thing. Like, that's it. Like, the bare minimum was just enough. Being safe was just enough. I mean, we were living in war, we were living in poverty. So you complaining about feeling sad or wanting something from your husband sounded really horrible.
Oh.
So there was no ever like, do you need anything? Are you feeling okay today? Like, that's not asked over there.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, you mentioned that your dad was sending you $100 a month, and even then, it wasn't really enough for the basics. Can you talk about what you went through as far as the poverty goes?
Yes. So he comes from a family of poverty. He never went to school or finished or did anything with his life, which is rare there too, because people over there start businesses and go to school and do things. He had a car that he worked in, as a taxi driver, and just worked just enough to bring groceries home. He never provided clothes or medical care or anything else that we needed. So my father, remember when I told you he took all my money, every month he would send me $100 while I was in Iraq. And I would use half that money for necessities, like getting food and juice, and maybe some cakes or crackers for the kids to have when they wake up from their naps. And the rest, the half, I would use to invest in gold, because that was my escape plan, is to have as much gold as I can and be able to sell it when I needed it.
Okay. Wow. And how old were you when you got pregnant with your third child?
I believe I was around 21.
Okay. So let's talk about that, because now you're in Iraq and you weren't able to go back to the States to have your child.
He didn't allow me to come back. Even getting pregnant was not by choice. Remember I told you, I wasn't allowed to leave the house, so I wasn't allowed to get on birth control, and I wasn't allowed to say no to intercourse. So it was just bound to happen, which of course I don't regret at all. I love my daughter, but at the time, that's what happened. And in Iraq, there's no health care. You just pay a couple dollars or what you can to the doctors when they provide a service, and the nurses. And it was my first time having a baby with him. Like, he's never experienced his wife giving birth and going through that. And it was terrifying for me with the healthcare and all, but he always had this anger and this control. And when I told him I was going in labor, he didn't believe me. He didn't really care. It was just like, whatever. He brushed it off. And I remember I just sat there in my room and I just gave up. I was like, well, I'm just going to sit here. And I just remember crying and just crying and crying. And his mom walking in and saying, ew, blood. And then shutting the door behind herself.
What?
Yeah. Oh, it was crazy. I thought that I was just going to die there. As many times as him and my father have tried to kill me physically, like to death, I thought my life was gonna end through complications of birth because I never got any prenatal care or anything. And I was like, well, this is it. So I just sat there and I cried, and she came out, and it was around 10 p.m. He called the midwife, and she came, cleaned me up, gave me some antibiotics, and that was that. And I woke up the next day and back to chores.
What?
And
Okay, I need to hold on, rewind. You gave birth to your daughter alone on the bed, just you, nothing else.
on the floor.
On Girl, you are incredible. I mean, I know that women have been giving birth for obviously forever, and it's natural, and yes, and whatever, but complications and pain and just there's so much that goes into it. Birthing is really a dangerous thing, and for you to just do that on your own like a badass, that's incredible. Really, I mean, 12 million gold stars for you for being able to do that. And the next day you're back to normal, back to doing chores?
Yeah. Like I said, I thought my life would end in more violent ways than that, but going through that, I was pretty sure that that was the end of it, for me and her. But I just cried until it just happened. And, well, I mean, we're both okay, but yeah, it was just like, yeah, okay, yeah. Do you think this is kind of like an excuse for you to just lay there? Like, and usually women over there, when they do give birth, they don't move, they don't do anything. And they have all their sisters and their mom with them, and the whole family's gathered. And, I didn't have that.
Wow. So, other than the obvious of it just being probably excruciating, did it go well? Were there any complications that came up? Or like how long were you in labor by yourself?
I don't remember. Maybe it was a few hours. I just remember it was nighttime. I don't even know what time it was, but there was no complications. But I don't know her height at birth. I don't know her weight. I don't know any of that information, which kind of is sad, but yeah.
Wow. You're amazing. I just like virtual hug. And birth is just so fresh in my mind because I just did it 8 weeks ago. And so I'm just like in awe of you. It's choking me up a little bit. I'm going to try not to cry. Okay. So moving forward, how were you able to deal with this after you've given birth and you're put to work again right away? I mean, you must have just been in complete survival mode.
That was just my life. I barely spoke the language at the time. I was learning. I'm learning to survive without just being physically beat every day. So for me, that was just a blessing. It's like, oh, like I get to wake up and just, not go through that was a blessing for me. But like I said, I knew I needed to escape. I knew I couldn't stay there forever, but I couldn't leave these 3 kids behind. There was no way. We lived 6 hours away from the embassy, and to get a taxi and get somebody to get me there behind his back with 3 kids was nearly impossible because everybody knew everybody. It was a small village. And if he even found out, I would just be like dead. So I had to wait and be very strategic with what I did with my money and my time and my intentions with everything.
So how did you get out of it then?
Things got really bad in Iraq. Eventually ISIS started happening and the Muslim ban, and things just started piling up with violence and war and terrorism. And internet was being more accessible. So I was able to communicate again with my siblings and my mom. So they talked into him. They're like, okay, the first time didn't work out. Let's bring you back out here. Let's get you guys out of this terrible situation. And thankfully he agreed. It took 2 years working on his visa. selling anything I had. I mean, I was selling any extra blanket I had, any extra shoe that I had to people that, like, I would send the kids to talk to neighbors, like, hey, go see if they'll buy this shoe or go see if they'll buy this, just to finish his visa, because he didn't pay for anything. He didn't pitch in, but I needed to make it work. I just needed to make it work. And that's what I did.
Was he working then, or were you expected to work?
No, he worked, but he was very, like, lazy. Like, he would work just enough for the groceries for that day.
Oh.
And whatever else he did with his money, I had no say. I had no control. I had no part of it. I would not get any of it at all, because I was always, you get money from your dad back home, or you have your own money, so I don't need to deal with you, type thing. So I never saw any of his money and what he did with it. I had no say.
Did you have to work, or were you allowed to work?
No, I was not allowed to. I was not allowed to leave the house.
Then how is he trying to say that you have your own money? Just the money that your dad was giving you?
That $100.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So frustrated with this man. Like, this doesn't even, I don't even have the words for how angry I am at this man, and I haven't even met him. Okay. Moving on. So you finally get to the States after a couple of years. Then what happens?
So we come to the States, and in my head, I'm thinking, okay, this is all behind us. You know, that whole 12 years of being with him, being married. I'm 26 years old now, and we have 3 kids. It's behind us.
12 years.
Yes.
Ooh.
And 3 kids, we're starting a new life, like the American dream, finally, you know. I come back to America and I get a job as a medical assistant, working night weekends at the hospital just for that little extra money. And I'm thinking that he's going to be happy, you know, he's going to, like, have that, like, the terrorism and the war and all that behind him. And I was very wrong. He was the same, and he would abuse us even here. And whenever, you know, I would talk to my dad about it, my dad would defend him and be like, well, you must have done something wrong, or you need to be a better wife, or don't think just because you're here in America, you get to do whatever you want. Like, so then I was back to square one, you know, but now both of them are controlling me at this time, because now my dad lives across the street and I have my husband, and they're both double controlling me.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. So you're working, is he working as well, or are you the sole provider?
He was working, but again, he got used to that. Like, I don't need to give you money. I don't need to pay for anything. So it was all on me. And that's why I worked the night weekends to make an extra couple dollars. But the moment I tried to sign up for school, he would go off on me like, you're selfish. How could you? Who's going to cook for us? Why can't you just apply for government assistance? So I would get dinged for that.
Oh, wow. How long did you have to deal with this before you were able to actually divorce him?
So about 6-7 months into coming back to America in 2017 is when he kind of gave up. And I told him, well, at the time, what really happened was I was in and out of hospitals. My depression and my stress was so bad that I would black out from my migraines and start vomiting. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I had CT scans done. I would go to a chiropractor, try to figure out what was wrong with my head. And my brother would have to, like, lift me and take me to the emergency room almost every week. One day, my brother, and he was only 18 at the time, stood up for me, and he's like, I am sick of this. Like, this is not going to happen to my sister anymore. I'm tired of seeing her like this. Get out of the house. You can't come back in. And he kicked him out. And I remember I was on my knees and I told my brother, I was like, I know I'm weak. Thank you for doing this. If I come back to you in a few days and tell you to let him in the house, do not let him. No matter what happens, please don't let him in the house, please. Mm-hmm. After that, there was a day where he did come back, and he was very angry for me at something. He locked me in the room and asked my younger son to grab a knife. He had me cornered in the room with the knife, like, poking in my throat. Oh. And I thought, okay, here we go again, you know. Luckily, because my dad lives across the street, my dad came and opened the door because he could hear me screaming. He came and opened the door, and my kids were downstairs, like, telling him, go help mom, go help mom. And they were young. So my dad came and he yelled at him. He's like, what do you think you're doing? She's going to call the cops now and get us both in trouble. He wasn't saying, what are you doing? This is my daughter. How dare you? He was saying, no, this is too far of the extreme to the point that she's going to call the cops and get legal action. And they're arguing back and forth. And I escape between them, run in the bathroom, and text my sister because I can't call and let them know I have my phone because I hid it in my clothing. And I text her, I'm like, call 911. I will not escape from the bathroom until you do. I cannot call them. I need you to call them for me. She called them. They came and arrested him. He was out in a few days. My dad was super angry. But after that, the mental abuse from my father and the control, things just kept escalating worse. But at this time, I was kind of done with it. So my brother wouldn't let my husband come back in the house. And my husband straight up said, he's like, if I don't get to do what I want to you and abuse you, I refuse to be in the country. So he went back because he refused to live.
What?
Yes, he voluntarily went back, and it was the best thing he's ever done.
Wow. That is, it's just like ego was his demise. I can't even, that's, the logic there is none. Okay. Wow. Okay. So you got away from him and you're still working. What's it like now? Are you still under control of your dad though? Because you're still in that house, right?
So we were in our own house across the street from my dad. And my dad was what he told me, he proposed a deal to me. He said, look, now that you've done this, you've brought such shame to the family for being divorced, as if I'm the first. And he said, look, you're going to move into our house. You could have this room for you and your kids. You will pay your stepmom some money to cook some extra food for you guys, and your schedule will be on the fridge. You are not allowed out of the house outside the schedule. And I said, no. And he's like, what do you mean, no? You're in your 20s with 3 kids. You're broke. You have nothing. What do you mean, no? And I said, I'm going to do it on my own. Like, don't worry about me. I'm going to do it.
Yes.
And he laughed at me like I've never seen him laugh. He told me, he's like, I give it a few years and your kids will be in the street selling drugs and there's no way. He's like, you're not going to go to school and work. I said, no, I'll do it. Don't worry, I'll do it. And he laughed. And I think my biggest drive till this day is that laugh that he laughed at me.
And you did it, girl. You definitely did it. Let's talk about that. The success story. I mean, you went on to get multiple degrees. Okay, I won't give it away. You tell it.
Well, after that, it was really hard. I mean, I still went through some really hardships. I was still wearing the hijab, the headscarf at the time. And I was working night weekends and I had to leave. And this is so bad, but I had to leave my kids home alone while I went to work. But I had to work at night so I can go to school all week. I had no option. I knew I had to do something. But I had my stepbrothers at the time and they were 14 or 15. So they're legally allowed to babysit. So they would babysit my kids sometimes or like spend the night there while I worked at night. But my father continued with the mental abuse, knowing that he couldn't control me, the mental abuse. So he'd come home and in front of my kids say really bad things about me, shame me, things like that. And one day I was at the gym. And I finally stopped going to the hospital because I started taking care of my mental health after my husband left. And one time my dad was like, I drove by the gym. Your car wasn't there. You're lying. You're out doing something bad. And he's like, come home right now. And he was in my apartment. So I was like, no. But then I came home and I was just sweaty and gym clothes. And I got on my knees. I'm like, Dad, like you cannot talk to me like this in front of my kids. Like I need them to respect me. I'm the only person in their life. And he laughed at me and I was like, you know what? Get out before I call the cops. And that was my last straw with him. And since then, I have not spoken to him. And after that, I experienced other things like racism and things like that. So I had to take the hijab off because I even had like state CYFD cases where neighbors will call cops because of me wearing a scarf and it intimidated them. So I had to hide that part of like being Muslim away, and that made my father even angrier to the point where he left the state and went back to Michigan.
These men.
Yes.
I mean, thank goodness for their poor choices in this case.
Yes, thank.
Wow. Okay. And I'm sorry that you had to experience that racism as well and you had to hide a part of who you were because that was your culture. And did you end up distancing yourself from being Muslim, or did you continue just kind of practicing in secret?
I distanced myself from the culture and the religion. I did, and it's not something I'm really proud of, but I felt like I really need to work on me rather than build a community with anybody, rather than being around people. I was so dedicated to giving my kids a better life. Being religious, being around people like me was not something on my mind. I just needed to give them a better, safe life.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't include anything with culture or religion. So I stepped away from all of that. And I just worked on myself and healing myself. And I just, like I mentioned, I continued to work every night, weekend at the hospital so I could go to school all week and have my school schedule in between their school schedule so I could pick them up and drop them off. And because I was just left all alone then.
Mm-hmm.
Their father left and my father left. And I was just like, okay, I'm still going to do this. But yeah, I stepped away from everybody at that point.
Well, I think it was the best thing for you, at least mentally. And I know you said you felt ashamed about it, but you did what was best for you and your family. And I think ultimately it paid off, and everything that you've accomplished is a tribute to that. So let's talk about what you did end up doing, the schooling that you got and everything that you accomplished afterwards.
Yeah, so I continued to go to school. I got a few associate degrees from the community college before moving forward with the university. My degrees are in criminology and international studies because of everything I went through. I wanted to educate myself more on global things and crime and just human behavior. I feel like was really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I was supposed to go to law school. I was the
What?
pre-law society at the university. I was the law school chair, and I was supposed to go to law school, and then COVID happened.
Ugh.
Yeah, so it messed up my plan in a way. But through that, I opened my own business. I started teaching myself financial literacy and becoming very passionate about that, and even helping my other friends and people I knew. And from there, I started doing marketing and business consulting, and I'm currently in a graduate program at the university. And I own my marketing agency. And, within the first year and a half of being in America, I bought a home for my kids so they each have their own room. Yeah. So life has been great since I just focus on myself.
This girl just straight up bought a house. Like, I've never even bought a house. Wow, that's amazing. Congrats on all of your hard work. I know it wasn't easy. I mean, everything that you had to do, and with 3 kids, wow, hats off to you. That's incredible. And with all of your degrees, and you said you wanted to learn more about human behavior, is there anything that you've kind of been able to deconstruct now that you can look back at your life through a different lens?
Very much so. Taking a lot of psychology classes, human behavior, all of that, I learned the importance of our childhood and the way we're raised in our childhood and how that, if you look back at, big criminals, politicians, whatever you look at the person, who they are, how they act, and what they do, good or bad, is a reflection of the way they were raised. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of the core of my mission when it comes to healing myself and my healing journey, but also me being a parent now. Because remember, I told you when I was a child, I couldn't go to my parents. It was just like, stay out of trouble or you'll be in trouble, even though you didn't know that was trouble. Yeah. My kids are now in high school. The boys are, my daughter's 10 now, and my boys are 15 and 17. And we're super close, we do everything together. We pray, we have gratitude for life, but we're super close. And that's, and my mission was kind of to make sure their childhood would not be like the one I experienced. And for my daughter to be able to fall in love and to marry out of choice and to have the choice of whatever she wants to do. And that was really important to me for them to end that cycle in a way. What I try to do is I cut off my father and I cut off everybody in my life that would shame me for my choices of leaving the culture and the religion. But because of it, my kids are just so positive and they're so kind and they're so loving because they don't know anything else. And I had to break that cycle. I had to cut off anything that tied me to that negativity.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do. It sounds so simple when you say it like, "Oh, I just cut everything off." But when you really get down to what that means, losing those relationships, which in your case, I don't think your dad was giving you any sort of positive thing in your life. I could be wrong, but I feel like that was an easy break. But when you talk about losing your community or your culture, that's a really big deal. And I think I just want to put words to that so people understand that it's not something that you can just decide to do one day. It takes years of deconstructing. It takes a lot of emotional toll to really figure out who you want to be after you get rid of some of those things and what you want to keep and who you want to interact with. And especially with how you grew up, being completely isolated in so many ways and throughout your entire life, I'm sure when you had the option to do anything you wanted, it was probably a little bit scary and you're trying to test the waters and see who you want to be and what friends you want to make now that there's no restrictions on who you can interact with. What was that experience like for you? Did you find it exciting? Was it scary? All of the above?
Coming back to America, so when I was in Iraq, before coming back, I had a journal, and in that journal, I wrote down very detailed description of who I was going to be when I came here.
Oh,
I
cool.
knew that I wanted, yes, and looking back, it's kind of like, oh, I manifested it,
Yeah.
but I was so clear on what I wanted. Before coming here, because as a medical assistant, I could get, a 9 to 5 job at a doctor's clinic and just be fine and be stable. But while I was in Iraq, I wrote down that I would work 9 to 5, work night weekends because school was non-negotiable for me. I had to go to school. I got my bachelor's within 3 years. And for somebody that's never been to high school or anything, and dipping into kind of being social and experiencing like who I was, I don't feel like I did that enough as I should have when it comes to the freedom aspect, because I was so hyper focused on giving them a better life that
Yeah.
that was all I saw. I was so tunnel vision on completing school, buying a home, and never having neighbors complain about us, having our own space, having their own rooms. Because even back in Iraq, I looked down on them and I said, I promised you guys, like one day you will all have your own room. And I was like, looking back, that sounded crazy, but within a year and a half of coming back, I was able to do that. I think the thing that I tested the most from my experience of my freedom is my potential and pushing to seeing myself at my fullest potential. And I think that has been incredible because we really don't know how far we can go. If we just try, even things that seem impossible. Like I was in Iraq and I was being threatened to be killed by the men that controlled my life. And I was telling myself that I'm going to be a college graduate and own a home while I was there. It sounded crazy. But going back to what you were saying about how hard it is to cut family off, coming back here because I was so focused, I didn't build relationships with friends, like strong relationships that I wish I could have. I have great support system. I have people in my life that are amazing, but walking when I graduated and not having anybody there, or having to go to my graduation, but nobody being able to bring my kids because I had to prepare and I didn't have anybody, or the fact that I had somebody, I can't say I didn't have somebody. I had people that would have been happy to be there and to support me and bring my kids to my graduation and all of that. But I think it was it was really hard for me to ask for help when I wished I would have had family during hard times. And that was really hard because when I do get sick, nobody knows. There's no grandfather taking the kids to the barber when I can't do it. There's nobody picking them up from daycare. There's like I had to be everybody.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing. until they grew up to be independent men now.
How are they doing now? I mean, without, of course, telling their stories, because I'm sure they want to keep some of their privacy, but are they thriving? I mean, breaking that cycle, breaking the chain, showing your boys this is how you treat a woman, showing your daughter this is what you should accept from a man and nothing less. I think all of that is so incredibly invaluable.
So my kids right now, like I mentioned, 2 are in high school and 1 in elementary. Both my boys have had almost like full-time jobs since they were 14 and 15. They have their own cars. They're doing good in school. I believe, they're kind of hyper independent, but at the same time, I tell them, I was like, you guys don't need to work. Like, you guys can, relax. And they would say things like, no, the queen deserves a day off.
Oh.
Or, no, I need to retire you before you wear yourself out. Things like that. And, they take care of their sister and they take her out and they do things for her. So, she I don't think she can accept anything less than what her brothers are giving her, which is a lot. And that makes me so proud.
Oh, you're getting me all choked up again. Look at you, Mom. You're just like Mom of the Year, doing all the things. Happy Mother's Day tomorrow. I don't know when this is going to release, but happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, my first one. It's just so awesome. I'm just in awe of everything that you've been able to build. And so we always end this with the consciousness side of the story. What makes you happy? Obviously your kids, but what brings you joy and excitement and peace?
What really brings me joy is being able to live in a time where we have the power and the ability to share our stories through social media and collaborate on platforms like yourself, like yours and others, and show people different lives that we live. Sometimes we take little things for granted, and half the world is living with things that we take for granted. And I think gratitude is so important. What makes me happy is knowing it was all worth it. Knowing that at the end, doing what's right for you is more important than anything, more than acceptance, more than what anybody can think of you. It makes me happy to know it was worth it, that I'm worth it, that I learned that I'm worth it, because I didn't think I was before.
Yeah. And how is your health now that you have all of those toxic people out of your life, that you are on your own and do? I mean, I'm sure it probably caught up to you, all of the working and the stressing and being your own village, raising your children. I'm sure that was really difficult. Now that they're a little bit older, you probably have a chance to take a breath. So how are you doing now?
I feel really blessed. I did work really hard for, school and work and to financially be where I'm at, but I've never felt healthier. I work out 4 to 5 times a day, a week.
Oh, I apologize. I was like, a day, girl. Setting the bar high.
I work out a lot. My kids work out with me. We eat healthy. We cook at home. And, even though I didn't stop cutting off negative people back then and then only, even now it's just, I have a circle of amazing positive people. My kids are now grown and I get to travel now. They take care of their younger sister. I just came back from an amazing healing retreat in Costa Rica.
Wow.
And
we're going there in the end of the summer. I'm like, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. You're going to love it. You should definitely check out the resorts.
Yeah, where did you go?
I have to look back. It's called Tabacan. I think it's the top rated one in the whole country. I'll send you their information.
Okay.
It was amazing.
Awesome. So you went to Costa Rica, healing retreats, and you're able to just do you now for the first time.
Yeah, it's weird. It takes a lot of adjusting. My kids have definitely put me in my soft girl era. I get to just wake up. I work from home. I run my business from home. I get to cook whenever I want, work out whenever I want, travel. And it's weird because now they're so independent that I really live for myself now. And it's now I really have 100% freedom. So it's amazing.
Yeah. That's incredible. It's so good to hear. I'm so glad that you're doing well and that your kids are doing well. Just all the praise again. I could just say it all day. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Wow, what an incredible story, everything you've gone through. I think I'm just a broken record at this point. I'm just really proud of you. That's it. So with that, we need your Linda Listen statement, your sassy statement as a viral video goes, or something inspirational.
Something sassy or inspirational?
Yeah.
Um,
If I were you, my Linda Listen would be, Linda Listen, I'm going to go where I want, when I want, with whoever I want, wearing whatever I want, and you have nothing to say about it. That would be mine for you.
Yeah, you said it so perfect. I can't repeat that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to steal your moment. If you have another one, please.
I think one that's really resonates with me is whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can escape, whether you think you can be happy, whether you think you can accomplish that goal, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. It's all in our mind. We can change our life just through our mindset.
Yeah. It starts with our mindset, right? Of course, there's going to be things that we can't control, but if you already shut yourself off in your mind saying you can't do something, then there's no way to progress past that. So absolutely, starting with that positive mindset is key. This has been awesome. Do you have any final thoughts before we go?
I just want to thank you so much for having me on here, and thank you for everything you do. I love your channel. I love listening to the interviews of everybody that you brought on. It really gives a different perspective for us listeners to connect with people in different lifestyles. So thank you for everything you do.
Oh, that's so great to hear. I'm glad that you enjoy the channel. Well, thank you for adding your voice to the mix. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find you very inspirational as well. And guys, if you want to reach out, you can through her Instagram. We'll put the link in the description, but it's just her full name, Ellaf_Altamimi. And yeah, this has been awesome. So if you guys want to support, leave those words of encouragement down below. Liking, subscribing really helps the algorithm. Sharing, of course, is always helpful. If you want to support the podcast even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/cults2consciousness. You can, I was going to say go to Costa Rica with us, but we just sold out unless anyone drops out last minute. But if you want to be put on the wait list, you can do that. The link is in the description. And then if you want to check out any of our merch, cults2consciousness.com under the merch tab. And if you like this video, I will link 2 more down here below. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.